Picture this, a vast, dark lake nestled in the rugged Scottish Highlands. Its waters so deep and ancient that sunlight barely penetrates the surface. For centuries, this place has been the backdrop to one of the world's most captivating mysteries, a legend whispered in hushed tones and shouted in bold headlines. Stories speak of something lurking in those shadowy depths, something enormous, elusive, and utterly unexplainable. From grainy photographs to eyewitness accounts that send shivers down your spine, the tale of the Loch Ness Monster has fascinated generations, blending folklore with a desperate human desire to believe there's still magic hiding in the corners of our modern world. What is it about this legend that continues to capture our imagination, decade after decade? Is it the possibility that we haven't uncovered all of Earth's secrets? Or is it something deeper, a timeless fascination with the unknown that tugs at something primal within us? Whether you're a skeptic or a true believer, there's no denying the powerful allure of Nessie. This isn't just a story about a mythical creature. It's a window into human nature itself, our hunger for mystery, our refusal to accept that everything has already been discovered, and our endless capacity for wonder. In this video, we're setting out on a journey to explore the heart of this enduring enigma. We'll revisit the most compelling sightings, separate fact from fiction, and dive into the scientific expeditions that have tried, and so far failed, to solve this puzzle once and for all. Along the way, we'll uncover how a local folktale became a global phenomenon, captivating millions and inspiring everything from serious research to tourist traps. So settle in and open your mind, because we're about to navigate the murky waters of doubt and discovery, where every ripple on the surface could be the clue that finally unlocks the truth. Long before blurry photographs and sonar readings, the legend was already taking root in the misty hills of Scotland. To truly understand the mystery of Loch Ness, we must journey back over 1,400 years to the era of saints and scribes. Our story begins not with a monster, but with a man, Saint Columba, an Irish monk who brought Christianity to Scotland. The earliest written account comes from the Life of Saint Columba, a text meticulously compiled by another abbot, Adamnon, in the late 7th century. According to this ancient biography, in the year 565, Columba was traveling near the river Ness, which flows from the loch. He encountered a group of Pictish mourners burying a man by the riverbank. They explained that the man had been swimming to retrieve a boat when he was suddenly mauled by a fearsome water beast that lurked in the depths. Moved by their grief and perhaps seeking to demonstrate divine power, Columba made a startling command. He instructed one of his own followers, a man named Luin Macu Min, to swim across the river and bring back the boat. As the brave, or perhaps terrified monk entered the water, the creature sensed a new meal and surged to the surface, rushing toward him with its jaws wide open. In that moment, Columba raised his hand and made the sign of the cross. He invoked the name of God and commanded the beast, shouting, "Go no further. Do not touch the man, begone at once." The account describes the monster halting abruptly, as if it had been pulled back by an invisible rope. Terrified by the saint's words, it fled back into the deep, dark water. Now, a modern reader might immediately question this story. It was written a century after the alleged event by a follower eager to document the miraculous deeds of his saintly hero. The account serves a clear purpose: to showcase Columba's holy authority over the pagan unknown, literally taming a primeval beast with the power of his faith. The creature itself is described vaguely, more a symbol of untamed nature and danger than a detailed zoological specimen. Yet this ancient report is profoundly significant. It planted the very first seed of the idea that something otherworldly and dangerous inhabited these waters. It established a pattern, a narrative template that will be repeated for centuries. A sudden, violent attack by an unseen aquatic creature, followed by a heroic confrontation. This 7th century story is the bedrock upon which the entire modern legend is built. It provides a historical and cultural origin point, connecting the monster to the landscape long before the term Nessie was ever uttered. For generations of locals, the tale of Saint Columba wasn't just a religious fable. It was a warning about the deep, dark loch, a piece of folklore that confirmed the water was a place of mystery and potential danger. It set the stage, creating a context of belief that would, centuries later, make the famous 1933 sighting not a complete shock, but almost an expected resurgence of an ancient truth. The monster had always been there, waiting in the stories just beneath the surface. But for all the power of ancient lore, the legend as we know it today truly ignited in the modern era, sparked not by a miracle but by a road. The year was 1933, and the quiet shores of Loch Ness were about to be thrust into the international spotlight. The catalyst was a major construction project, the completion of the A82 road along the loch's northwestern shore. For the first time, travelers and tourists had an unobstructed, clear view of the entire length of the water from their car windows. This new accessibility meant the number of potential witnesses multiplied exponentially. The loch was no longer a remote secret known only to locals. It was now on the map, and the world was driving right past it. It was against this backdrop that a local couple, Aldi and John Mackay, took a drive home to Inverness on a quiet afternoon in April. As they drove along the new road, Mrs. Mackay noticed a tremendous commotion in the water. She later described seeing an enormous creature with a body resembling a whale, rolling and plunging in the center of the loch. The disturbance it created was violent and unmistakable. Intrigued and undoubtedly shocked, the Mackays reported what they saw to the Inverness Courier, the local newspaper. The paper's editor, a shrewd man named Evan Barron, recognized a great story, but he also needed a catchy name. He assigned the story to a young reporter, Alex Campbell, who penned the article under the headline, "Strange Spectacle on Loch Ness," and in it he referred to the unknown animal as a monster. That single word was like a spark in a dry forest. The term monster captured the public's imagination in a way that an unknown creature or large animal never could. It was dramatic, it was thrilling, and it sold newspapers. This initial report in May of 1933 opened the floodgates. Suddenly, everyone was looking at the loch, and it seemed everyone was seeing something. Sightings began to pour in from all corners. A tourist on holiday reported a long, serpentine neck breaking the surface. A group of fishermen described a humped back gliding silently through the water before disappearing into the deep. Each account added a new detail, building a collective picture of a prehistoric survivor lurking in the depths. The media frenzy was immediate and intense. Scottish newspapers were followed by London papers, and then the story leaped across the Atlantic, making headlines in the United States. The Loch Ness Monster was no longer a local curiosity, it was a global sensation. The phenomenon was perfectly timed. The world was in the grip of the Great Depression, and people were hungry for a distraction, a wonder, a mystery that offered escape from economic hardship. Furthermore, the early 1930s was a golden age of exploration and discovery, with news stories about hidden temples and lost worlds. The idea that a dinosaur might still be alive in a Scottish loch fit perfectly into this narrative of a world still brimming with undiscovered secrets. This surge of attention created a feedback loop. More headlines encouraged more people to visit, and more visitors inevitably led to more reported sightings, each one feeding the growing legend of the beast the world would soon affectionately call Nessie. Of all the evidence that has ever surfaced in the Loch Ness mystery, one single image towers above the rest, an icon so powerful it shaped the world's imagination for generations. It was April 1934 when a London gynecologist named Robert Kenneth Wilson provided the Daily Mail newspaper with a photograph that seemed to offer irrefutable proof. The image, soon christened the surgeon's photograph, was stark, compelling, and perfectly composed. It showed the loch's calm, grey water broken by a long, slender neck and a small, reptilian head gazing serenely toward the shore. It was exactly what the public and the press wanted to see, a clear, unambiguous glimpse of the prehistoric plesios, or they all believed was hiding in the depths. The photograph's credibility was anchored in the impeccable reputation of its source. Dr. Wilson was a respected medical professional, a man of science, and he presented himself as a reluctant witness. He claimed he just happened to be by the loch with his camera when he captured this astonishing sight. He wasn't a fame seeker, he was a sober, credible expert who simply documented what he saw. The media and the public embraced this narrative completely. Here was a man with no apparent motive to lie, offering what looked like concrete evidence. The image was reproduced in newspapers and magazines around the globe, becoming the definitive portrait of the Loch Ness Monster. It was entered into the official record, cited by believers, and used to dismiss skeptics for over 6 decades. It wasn't just a photo, it was the cornerstone of the entire phenomenon. But the truth, when it finally emerged more than 60 years later, was a stunning betrayal of that trust. The iconic image wasn't a miraculous snapshot of a surviving dinosaur. It was an elaborate and brilliantly conceived hoax, engineered not by a doctor, but by a big game hunter with a grudge. The real mastermind was a man named Marmaduke Wetherell. Just a few months earlier, the Daily Mail had hired Wetherell to track down the monster. He'd eagerly taken on the job, but his expedition ended in humiliation when he presented what he claimed were the creature's footprints, which were quickly exposed as having been made with a dried hippopotamus foot, likely repurposed from an umbrella stand. The newspaper publicly mocked him, and Wetherell was left furious and disgraced, seeking revenge against the publication that had made him a laughingstock. He devised an ingenious plan for payback, enlisting his son, Ian, and his future son-in-law, Christian Spurling, a skilled model maker. Wetherell set out to create the evidence the world so desperately wanted to believe. Spurling crafted the famous head and neck using a 14-inch-long toy submarine and some wood filler, sculpting a sleek, serpentine form. They then attached the model to the submarine and, in the quiet waters of Loch Ness, released it to be photographed. The final stroke of genius was recruiting Dr. Wilson, a family acquaintance, to act as the credible frontman to deliver the photograph to the Daily Mail. The respected surgeon's involvement was the key that sold the lie, lending the hoax an air of scientific respectability it never deserved. The deception held firm for generations, but the weight of the secret eventually became too much for those involved. The full story finally unraveled in 1994 when Christian Spurling, the last surviving conspirator, confessed on his deathbed. He provided a detailed account of the plot, revealing how a toy, some plastic wood, and a desire for revenge had fooled the entire world. The exposure of the surgeon's photograph as a hoax was a devastating blow to the credibility of the Nessie legend. It became a cautionary tale about the power of suggestion, the desire to believe, and how easily a compelling story can override critical thinking. Yet, in a strange way, the photograph's enduring fame, even after its exposure, speaks to something deeper. It proves that the myth itself is often more powerful than the truth, and that the image of that mysterious creature breaking the water's surface remains, and likely will always remain, an indelible part of our collective imagination. Despite the crushing blow of the surgeon's photograph hoax, the mystery refused to die. In fact, the 1960s and 70s marked a dramatic shift, transforming the hunt for Nessie from a pursuit of tabloid headlines into a legitimate scientific endeavor. The world's fascination had simply grown too strong to be dismissed by a single exposed trick. This was the era where technology would finally meet the myth as teams of serious researchers, armed with sonar, underwater cameras, and a determination to find answers, descended upon the loch. One of the first major efforts was the 1960 Oxford and Cambridge joint expedition. For the first time, prestigious academic institutions were putting their reputations on the line to investigate the phenomenon. The team employed a systematic approach, methodically surveying the loch with echo-sounding equipment. While they did not return with a definitive image of a monster, they did record something profoundly significant: several large, moving sonar contacts that were entirely unidentifiable. These weren't vague blips. The echoes suggested substantial, solid objects traveling deep below the surface. Objects that moved with a purpose and scale that couldn't be explained by known fish or drifting debris. These enigmatic readings provided a new kind of evidence, one that wasn't reliant on fallible human eyesight or questionable photographs. It was data, and it suggested that there was indeed something in the loch worth finding. This initial foray paved the way for even more ambitious projects. In 1969, the newspaper The Boston Globe and the electronics company Vickers Limited sponsored a sophisticated operation. They deployed a powerful, high-intensity strobe light and an underwater camera, suspended together and lowered to different depths in an attempt to illuminate and photograph the dark waters. Dubbed the Vickers Viperfish, this rig was a marvel of engineering for its time, designed to operate automatically and capture anything that swam past. The operation was lengthy and grueling, but it yielded one particularly tantalizing result: a single, blurry photograph showing what appears to be a large, diamond-shaped flipper. While far from conclusive and criticized by some as a potentially distorted image of a decaying log, the photo ignited fresh debate. For believers, it was a potential glimpse of a powerful appendage, a biological structure unlike anything native to the loch. Then came the expedition that would produce some of the most compelling and controversial evidence in the entire history of the search. In 1972, the Academy of Applied Science, a private American organization, launched a project led by law attorney and dedicated monster hunter Robert H. Rines and his team employed cutting-edge technology, a sonar transponder system and underwater cameras equipped with high-frequency strobes. Their patience and innovation were rewarded in a way that sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Their sonar units tracked large, moving targets simultaneously at different depths, suggesting not one but multiple large creatures, but the real bombshell came from their cameras. One photograph taken in the murky green darkness seemed to show a rough-textured, flipper-like object. Another, the most famous of the set known as the apex photo, appeared to reveal the head, neck, and body of a large, unknown animal. The image was grainy and open to interpretation, but to many, it strikingly resembled a plesiosaur. The impact of these photos cannot be overstated. They were considered so convincing that in 1975, the prestigious journal Nature published a companion article about them, and 2 members of the British Parliament even submitted a motion calling for the protection of the monster. The Rines photos represented the high watermark of serious scientific interest in the Loch Ness Monster. They suggested that the truth might finally be within reach, that technology had finally caught up to the legend. However, this wave of optimism would eventually be tempered. Later analyses raised serious doubts, suggesting the flipper photo might be the rotting hull of a sunken boat, and the body shot a likely distortion of a much more mundane object on the loch bed, its dramatic shape enhanced by the interplay of low light and sediment. Yet, even with these doubts, the expeditions of this era permanently altered the conversation. They moved the search out of the realm of pure folklore and into the world of sonar pings, strobe lights, and data analysis, leaving behind a legacy of intriguing, unanswered questions that would fuel the quest for decades to come. The quest for Nessie entered a new and electrifying phase in 1975, a year that would deliver what many considered the most convincing visual evidence ever captured. While earlier expeditions had yielded intriguing sonar contacts and blurry shapes, the work of Dr. Robert Rines and the Academy of Applied Science promised something far more tangible: a clear, detailed photograph from the inky darkness of the loch's depths. The team had returned with their sophisticated equipment, determined to cut through the murk with technology. Their approach was methodical, using a combination of sonar to detect movement and trigger high-frequency strobe lights, which would then illuminate the subject for an array of synchronized cameras. It was in this meticulous setup that they captured an image that seemed to defy all skeptical explanations. The now famous photograph, often referred to as the flipper photo, is a study in contrast. To the untrained eye, it is a chaotic mess of light and shadow, a grainy underwater scene dominated by a textured, rocky-looking surface. But upon closer inspection, and more importantly, after undergoing sophisticated image enhancement at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California, a remarkable form emerges. The enhancements revealed a distinct rhomboid-shaped object, roughly 6 to 8 feet in length, with a rough, pebbled texture along one edge that strikingly resembled the skin of an elephant or a reptile. Its shape was asymmetrical and organic, tapering to a point, and it appeared to be attached to a larger, unseen body. For believers, this was the smoking gun. This was not a vague neck or a distant hump. This was an apparent anatomical close-up, a limb that mirrored the flipper of a large marine animal like a plesiosaur. The scientific community initially reacted with a wave of stunned excitement. The credibility of the source, the advanced technology used, and the involvement of a prestigious institution like JPL lent the photograph an authority that the surgeon's photo never truly possessed. The image was considered so compelling that it was featured in a landmark article in the journal Nature, and it directly inspired 2 British members of Parliament to lobby for official protection of the creature. For a brief, thrilling moment, it seemed the centuries-old mystery was on the verge of being solved not by folklore but by forensic science. The photograph was presented as physical proof that a large, unknown, and possibly prehistoric animal inhabited the loch. However, this wave of optimism inevitably crashed against the rocks of scientific scrutiny. As experts from various fields began to analyze the image, alternative interpretations emerged. Skeptics pointed out that the loch bed is littered with ancient tree trunks, some of which have lain there for centuries, waterlogged and decaying in the cold, sterile water. These logs can undergo a unique process where their cellulose breaks down while their lignin skeleton remains, creating bizarre, eroded shapes that often resemble organic structures like flippers or necks. Critics argued that the flipper was far more likely one of these decomposing tree trunks, its suggestive shape a classic example of pareidolia, the human tendency to see familiar patterns in random stimuli. The pebbled texture, they suggested, could simply be the natural grain of the waterlogged wood or even a coincidental pattern of sediment and algae. The debate surrounding this single image encapsulates the entire Loch Ness mystery in microcosm. It represents the eternal clash between ardent belief and rigorous skepticism, between the desire for discovery and the demand for irrefutable proof. The Rhine's flipper photo remains a Rorschach test. What you see in its grainy contours depends entirely on what you already believe. For some, it is a tantalizing glimpse of a lost world, a piece of a puzzle that is almost complete. For others, it is a testament to the power of illusion, a reminder that even our most advanced tools can be deceived by the tricks of light, water, and hope. It is neither fully validated nor completely debunked, forever suspended in that captivating space between possibility and doubt, ensuring its place as one of the most intriguing and controversial chapters in the endless hunt for the truth. Fueled by the tantalizing but disputed evidence of the 70s, the hunt for Nessie reached its technological zenith in the autumn of 1987 with an operation of unprecedented scale and ambition. Dubbed Operation Deepscan, this was not a weekend project by enthusiastic amateurs. It was a meticulously planned $250,000 scientific endeavor that aimed to settle the debate once and for all. The mastermind behind this massive undertaking was Adrian Shine, a naturalist and Loch Ness researcher who had grown frustrated with the inconclusive nature of past efforts. His plan was brilliantly simple in concept yet daunting in execution: to deploy a flotilla of boats across the entire width of the loch and sweep its length with a continuous wall of sound, leaving no hiding place for any large, unknown creature. On the morning of October 9th, the still Highland air was filled with the low thrum of diesel engines as 24 vessels, ranging from fishing boats to pleasure cruisers, lined up across the narrowest part of Loch Ness near Urquhart Castle. Each boat was equipped with a sophisticated echo-sounding device, and they moved in a perfectly synchronized line, like a giant comb being dragged through the water. The sonar systems were calibrated to ignore small fish and debris, focusing instead on detecting objects larger than 10 feet in length. For 3 days, this armada traversed the loch, covering its entire 23-mile length and generating millions of data points. The world watched, captivated by the live media coverage that portrayed this as the final, definitive search. The pressure was immense, the anticipation palpable. Would this great technological net finally capture the legend? Midway through the operation, a surge of excitement ran through the command center. One of the sonar operators on a vessel called the John Murray registered a strong, solid contact. The echo suggested a large, moving object, estimated to be between 15 and 20 feet long, traveling at a depth of nearly 600 feet. It was exactly the kind of reading they had hoped for, an unidentified large moving object, or ULMO, that defied immediate explanation. The crew quickly alerted other boats in the line, and for a tense, thrilling period, they attempted to track the target. The contact held for several minutes before vanishing into the profound depths, just as mysteriously as it had appeared. To the team on the water and to a hopeful public watching at home, this felt like a potential breakthrough. Yet, in the cold light of post-expedition analysis, the triumphant narrative began to unravel. While Operation Deepscan was a monumental feat of logistics and did indeed record 3 strong, unexplained contacts, the results were ultimately and frustratingly inconclusive. Adrian Shine himself, ever the cautious scientist, refrained from declaring victory. He presented the data not as proof of a monster, but as evidence of anomalies that warranted further investigation. Skeptics were quick to offer alternative explanations for the famous contact. The most plausible theory suggested the sonar had not pinged off a living animal, but off a vast, submerged cloud of decaying organic material known as a peat cloud. Loch Ness is peat-stained, its waters full of suspended particles. As plant matter on the loch bed decomposes, it can release large bubbles of methane gas that carry clouds of dark peat up toward the surface. To a sonar beam, this rising, dense, swirling mass could easily be misinterpreted as a single, large, solid object moving through the water. Operation Deepscan, for all its ambition and technology, ultimately proved that the loch itself is the greatest trickster of all. It demonstrated that the environment is capable of producing natural phenomena that perfectly mimic the signatures one would expect from a large creature. The operation did not find a monster, but it also did not prove the monster's non-existence. Instead, it added a new layer of complexity to the mystery, showing that the answers we seek are often hidden not just in the water, but in the very way we interpret the data we retrieve from it. The Great Sonar Sweep became a symbol of the entire quest, a heroic human effort to impose order and understanding on a deep, dark, and stubbornly enigmatic natural world. While the sonar expeditions of the 70s and 80s were probing the depths, one of the most compelling pieces of surface evidence had already been captured 2 decades earlier, not by a team of scientists but by a lone believer with a cine camera. In the spring of 1960, aeronautical engineer Tim Dinsdale, inspired by the countless stories, decided to mount his own expedition to Loch Ness. He spent days patiently scanning the water from a vantage point above the loch, and on his final day, his perseverance was rewarded with something extraordinary. Through his telephoto lens, he saw a strange, reddish-brown hump break the surface about a mile away. It moved with a purpose, creating a distinct wake before slowly submerging and disappearing. Dinsdale kept his camera rolling, capturing approximately 4 feet of film that would become a cornerstone of the entire mystery. This wasn't a blurry still photograph, it was motion picture footage. The audience could see the object in relation to its environment, observe its movement, and gauge its speed. Dinsdale, an engineer by trade, was a meticulous and credible witness. He immediately sent the film to the Joint Air Reconnaissance Intelligence Center, or JRRIC, for analysis. This was a highly respected unit of the Royal Air Force, staffed by experts trained to analyze aerial photographs and identify enemy equipment. Their task was to determine what the object on the film was, and more importantly, what it was not. After a thorough frame-by-frame examination, their conclusion sent shockwaves through the debate. The analysts ruled out a boat, a submarine, or any other known man-made vessel. They noted that the object displayed a slight but perceptible change in shape and profile as it moved, which was inconsistent with a rigid structure. Their official assessment was that the film showed an animate object, a living creature, and they estimated its length to be somewhere between 12 and 16 feet. For believers, the JRRIC analysis was a monumental victory. Here was a government military agency, an entity concerned with cold, hard facts of national security, lending its considerable credibility to the existence of an unknown large animal in the loch. The Dinsdale film quickly became the gold standard of visual evidence, seemingly immune to the accusations of hoax that had plagued other sightings. It was presented as objective, scientific proof that could not be easily dismissed. The film's power lay in its context. It showed not just a shape, but a behavior, a living thing interacting with its environment in a way that felt undeniably real. However, as with all things related to Loch Ness, time and advancing technology would cast new shadows of doubt. Decades later, the film was subjected to modern digital enhancement and analysis. Skeptics, including prominent biologist and Nessie debunker Richard Dawkins, proposed a new theory. Upon closer inspection, they argued that the famous hump displayed a startlingly straight and rigid leading edge. They suggested that the object was not a living creature at all, but actually a boat specifically. The cabin cruiser that Dinsdale himself had noted was in the area that day. According to this interpretation, the wake seen behind the object was not caused by a submerged body, but was simply the boat's own trail, made more dramatic by the telephoto lens and the angle of the sun. The perceived change in shape, they contended, could be an optical illusion caused by the boat moving in and out of patches of sunlight glinting on the water. The debate over the Dinsdale film now rests in a state of permanent stalemate, a perfect microcosm of the entire Loch Ness phenomenon. To one side, it remains the clearest evidence of an unknown animate object, validated by impartial military experts. To the other, it is a classic case of misidentification, where a known object is transformed into a monster by distance, expectation, and the limitations of camera technology. There is no definitive proof to fully confirm either view. This enduring ambiguity is perhaps the film's greatest legacy. It demonstrates that even our best evidence is filtered through the lens of our own perception, and that what we see is often shaped as much by what we hope to find as by what is actually there. The film forever holds its secret, a silent, grainy testament to the elusiveness of the truth. While the Dinsdale film offered a moving picture, another piece of early and often overlooked evidence comes from a silent, grainy reel shot just a few years after the monster first seized the world's attention. In 1938, a South African tourist named G. E. Taylor was visiting the loch, armed with a 16mm cine camera. From a vantage point on the shore, he captured approximately 3 minutes of footage showing a dark, indistinct object moving slowly across the water's surface. The film is jarringly different from the clear, iconic surgeon's photograph. It is distant, shaky, and utterly ambiguous. Taylor himself never made grand claims about what he had filmed, but when the footage was later analyzed by experts, including the same JRRIC unit that examined Dinsdale's film, their conclusion was intriguing. They confirmed the object was neither a boat nor a floating log, estimating its length to be around 15 to 18 feet and noting its slow, steady movement against the wind. It was another official, if cautious, validation of something unexplained in the loch. Yet the Taylor film, like all visual evidence from Loch Ness, exists in a perpetual state of reinterpretation. Modern analysts, with the benefit of digital tools and a more skeptical eye, point out that the object's motion is strikingly similar to that of a group of animals commonly found in the area, otters. A line of 3 or 4 otters swimming in a row can create a single, long, hump-like silhouette on the surface, with their diving and resurfacing giving the illusion of a single, continuous body moving through the water. This natural misinterpretation lies at the very heart of countless sightings. The human brain is wired to find patterns and impose meaning on ambiguous shapes, a phenomenon known as pareidolia. When we look at the choppy, peat-stained waters of Loch Ness with an expectation of seeing a monster, it is incredibly easy for our minds to transform a known animal into an unknown one. This principle extends far beyond the Taylor film and applies to a vast archive of photographs and videos that have emerged over the decades. Take, for example, the famous photograph known as the McNab photo, taken by bank manager Peter McNab in 1955. It shows 2 dark humps in Urquhart Bay with a castle ruin in the background, creating a seemingly perfect composition. For years, it was hailed as one of the best pictures of the monster. However, a closer analysis of the wake patterns and the scale suggests a far more mundane explanation. A large boat, possibly a fishing vessel, traveling through the bay at the exact moment the photo was taken. The camera's angle and the distance simply compressed the view, merging the boat's cabin and its wash into a monstrous form. Other common culprits behind photographic evidence include floating logs and waves. Loch Ness is surrounded by forests, and storms regularly wash trees and large branches into the water. A waterlogged pine tree, saturated and heavy, can float just below the surface for weeks, its gnarled branches resembling a spiny back. When a sudden wave or a gust of wind sets it in motion, it can appear to be swimming. Similarly, the loch is notorious for its unique and powerful wave patterns. A phenomenon known as a cyc, a standing wave that oscillates in a contained body of water, can create a single, large and solitary wave that moves against the prevailing wind direction. To a hopeful observer, this solitary, anomalous wave can look exactly like the wake of a large, submerged animal powering its way through the water. Even large marine animals that are occasional visitors to the loch are frequently mistaken for the monster. Seals, for instance, have been known to swim up the River Ness from the Moray Firth. A seal in the water presents a familiar series of shapes: a rounded head, a curved back, and then a flipper. But if a viewer only catches a brief, fragmented glimpse, these individual parts can be mentally assembled into the classic long-necked, hump-backed silhouette of Nessie. An otter or a group of otters, as with the Taylor film, creates a string of humps. A diving bird like a cormorant can leave behind a V-shaped wake that mimics the trail of something much larger just below the surface. What the long history of visual evidence ultimately teaches us is that Loch Ness is a master of illusion. Its dark water acts as a blurry lens, its environment is filled with deceptive natural debris, and its wildlife provides all the necessary components for a convincing misidentification. The photographs and films are not necessarily hoaxes. In most cases, they are sincere documents of what a person genuinely believed they saw. They are snapshots of a moment where perception, expectation, and reality collided. They prove that the monster is not just a creature of flesh and blood, but a creature of psychology and environment, born from the interplay of a mysterious landscape and our deep, innate desire to believe that there is still wonder hidden in the world's forgotten corners. The quest for visual proof, while endlessly debated, has always been complemented by a more objective form of evidence, one that operates in the realm of sound waves and electronic pings, far from the trickery of light and perception. This is the world of sonar, and its readings from the depths of Loch Ness have provided some of the most enduring and scientifically intriguing pieces of the puzzle. Long before high-tech expeditions like Operation Deepscan, a simple fishing boat made the first recorded and perhaps one of the most compelling sonar contacts in the loch's history. It was the winter of 1954, and the crew of the fishing vessel rival Roman III was engaged in a routine survey of the loch's fish stocks using one of the early commercial echo-sounding units. As they worked, their equipment began to behave strangely. The sonar chart, a rolling sheet of paper that recorded the depth and any objects below, suddenly showed a massive, solid return. This wasn't a school of fish, it was a single, substantial object. The captain and his crew watched in astonishment as the stylus etched a clear, strong line on the paper, tracking an object that was moving at a depth of nearly 500 feet. Even more startling was its speed and behavior. The object was pacing the boat, maintaining a steady course before eventually outrunning the vessel and descending to an astonishing depth of over 900 feet. This last detail is particularly crucial as it defies the known biology of every creature native to these waters. No known fish in Loch Ness, not even the massive Atlantic sturgeon that are sometimes proposed as an explanation, can survive or function at such profound pressures and in such cold, oxygen-deprived conditions. The crew, experienced men of the sea who understood their equipment, were utterly baffled. They had no reason to fabricate a story. They were simply doing their job when their instruments registered something that, by all known parameters, should not have been there. This early encounter set a precedent for decades of similar unexplained sonar contacts. These aren't vague blips or fleeting shadows. They are strong, defined echoes that suggest a solid object of considerable size. In the 1960s, the same Oxford and Cambridge expedition that produced inconclusive visual evidence recorded multiple sonar hits on large, moving targets. One memorable contact involved their sonar unit tracking two separate objects, one rising and one sinking, moving in a coordinated fashion that suggested intelligent avoidance of their equipment, a behavior far more complex than that of a drifting log or a cloud of gas. Years later, in the 1980s, a commercial cruise boat named the MV Royal Scot was taking tourists on a sightseeing trip when its captain, John West, decided to demonstrate the onboard sonar. To his complete surprise and the delight of his passengers, the screen clearly showed a large, arch-shaped object rising from the loch bed near Urquhart Castle. It ascended to a depth of about 170 feet, traveled parallel to the boat for several minutes, and then vanished from the screen. The strength of sonar evidence lies in its objectivity. It removes the fallible human witness from the equation, replacing subjective description with hard data. A sonar return gives a measurement size, depth, speed, and sometimes even a rough silhouette. Skeptics, of course, have proposed natural explanations for these phantom echoes. The most common theory points to the unique physical properties of Loch Ness itself. The water is full of suspended peat particles, and the loch's steep, rocky sides are prone to landslides and debris falls. A sudden release of methane gas from decomposing plant matter on the bottom could create a large, dense bubble plume that would register as a solid mass on sonar. Similarly, a temperature inversion layer where a band of colder water sits beneath a warmer layer can sometimes bend the sonar beams, creating false echoes or ghost returns. Yet, for every proposed natural cause, there is a counterpoint from sonar experts and veteran boat captains. They argue that experienced operators can usually distinguish between a biological target, a hard object, and an anomaly like a gas bubble. The specific behaviors recorded, such as the target tracked by the rival Roman 3 that outpaced the boat and dove to extreme depths, or the two objects moving in tandem on the Oxford-Cambridge sonar, don't neatly fit the model of a passive, bubbling gas release or a drifting log. These contacts exhibit a purpose and a propulsion that feels animate. This ongoing back and forth ensures that sonar evidence occupies a unique and frustrating space in the mystery. It is the most reliable form of data we have, yet it is still just data open to interpretation. It tells us definitively that something is down there creating these echoes, but it cannot on its own tell us what that something is. It provides the tantalizing signature of a mystery, a persistent and unexplained presence lurking in the sonar shadows of the deep, forever just beyond the reach of absolute identification. But if Nessie isn't a prehistoric reptile, what could possibly explain over 1,000 eyewitness accounts spanning decades? The answer may lie not in the water, but beneath it and all around it, in the very unique and volatile geology of the Scottish Highlands. Loch Ness sits directly atop the Great Glen Fault, a massive geological scar that slices diagonally across Scotland. This isn't a dormant feature, it's an active fault line, with minor earthquakes rattling the region on a regular basis. These tremors, often too faint for humans to feel, can have a dramatic effect on the loch. They can dislodge vast amounts of sediment from the steep underwater cliffs, creating sudden, dark clouds that rise toward the surface, appearing from above like a massive creature stirring from the depths. More intriguingly, this seismic activity can release something far more deceptive: large pockets of trapped gas. The peat-rich soil and decaying plant matter that line the bottom of Loch Ness are a perfect recipe for methane production. As organic material decomposes in the cold, oxygen-starved depths, it generates substantial bubbles of this gas which become trapped in the sediment. A small tremor is all it takes to release these pockets. When they break free, the results can be spectacular. A large, dense bubble of methane rushing toward the surface doesn't just pop, it creates a significant upheaval. It can roil the water, creating a churning, boiling effect that looks like something large is thrashing just below the surface. As it reaches the air, it can even produce a hissing sound and a distinct foul odor. For a witness on the shore, this event perfectly matches the classic description of the monster: a violent disturbance in otherwise calm water, accompanied by strange sounds and even a peculiar smell. It's a compelling natural phenomenon that requires no mythical beast, just basic chemistry and geology. The loch is also a master of light and illusion, thanks to a complex atmospheric condition known as a temperature inversion. Normally, air gets colder the higher you go, but under certain conditions, a layer of warm air can settle over the loch, trapping a blanket of much colder air beneath it right at the water's surface. When this happens, it creates a natural mirage effect, bending and distorting light rays in a way that can dramatically alter the appearance of ordinary objects. A common seagull floating 100 yards away can be magnified and stretched by this optical trickery, its shape blurring into something elongated and serpentine. A log or a rowboat in the distance can appear to be moving against the wind or current, its image shimmering and morphing in the unstable air. These inversions are not rare occurrences. They are a frequent feature of the loch's microclimate, providing a ready-made explanation for dozens of sightings where witnesses described something that looked unnatural and seemed to move in impossible ways. Then there are the loch's permanent residents, which are often mistaken for visitors from a bygone era. The waters and surrounding banks are home to a population of Eurasian otters. These animals are highly social and often travel in groups, swimming in a line. When they do, the series of their humped backs breaking the surface can create a single, long, undulating silhouette that looks exactly like a multi-humped sea serpent moving through the water. A group of 5 or 6 otters can easily create the impression of a creature 30 feet long. Similarly, a large red deer or stag swimming across one of the loch's narrower sections will only have its head and antlers visible. To a distant observer, this can transform into the classic image of Nessie's small head and long neck. These animal misidentifications are not a reflection of foolishness on the part of the witness. They are a testament to the power of distance, expectation, and the difficult viewing conditions on a vast, often misty body of water. Perhaps the most stubborn and convincing culprit is the simplest, floating logs. The loch is surrounded by ancient pine forests, and erosion constantly washes trees and large branches into the water. A waterlogged pine tree, saturated and heavy, can float vertically, suspended just below the surface for weeks. Its gnarled, broken branches can resemble a spiny back, and when a sudden underwater current or a gust of wind sets it in motion, it can appear to be swimming before slowly sinking back into the gloom. The cold, peaty water, which lacks much of the oxygen that promotes rapid decay, acts as a preservative, allowing these logs to remain intact and deceptive for a remarkably long time. Many of the most famous photographs of a dark, humped object are almost indistinguishable from a picture of a slowly rotting, drifting tree trunk. Finally, the loch itself generates its own unique and confusing wave patterns. One of the most deceptive is a phenomenon called a cyc. This is a standing wave that oscillates in a contained body of water, like water sloshing in a bathtub. In a long, deep, and narrow loch like Ness, a cyc can create a single, large, and perfectly solitary wave that moves independently of the wind or current. It doesn't look like part of a wave train. It looks like the powerful, V-shaped wake of a very large object moving just underwater. For someone glancing at the loch at that exact moment, the evidence seems undeniable, a wake without a visible cause, which must therefore be made by something hidden beneath the surface. The loch, in its restless motion, creates its own monster, a ghost of water and physics that has fooled countless eyes. These scientific and natural explanations don't seek to ridicule the believers. Instead, they reveal an environment that is inherently mysterious, a place where the ordinary is constantly being transformed into the extraordinary by a combination of rare geology, tricky light, and the power of suggestion. So, if we are to take the sightings seriously and assume there is a large, unknown animal in Loch Ness, we must confront a critical scientific question. What exactly could it be, and is such a creature even biologically possible in this environment? The loch, while immense to our eyes, presents a harsh and limiting world for any large predator. Let's explore the most popular candidates, weighing their tantalizing possibilities against the cold, hard constraints of biology and ecology. The most enduring and popular image of Nessie is that of a plesios, or a long-necked marine reptile that went extinct alongside the dinosaurs 66 million years ago. The visual match is uncanny: the small head, the elongated neck, the large, rounded body, and powerful flippers. It's a romantic and thrilling idea, a living fossil, a dinosaur surviving in a hidden valley untouched by time. The plesios, or theory, offers a perfect explanation for the classic sightings, but does it hold up to scrutiny? The challenges are immense. First, Loch Ness was scraped clean by glaciers during the last ice age and was frozen solid for thousands of years. It only became a lake again around 10,000 years ago when the glaciers retreated. There is no geological way a population of air-breathing marine reptiles could have survived that deep freeze and then recolonized the loch. Secondly, plesiosaurs were ocean dwellers. While they might have ventured into estuaries, a freshwater loch, isolated from the sea and with a completely different chemical composition, would be a hostile environment. Their bodies were adapted for saltwater, not the peaty freshwater of Loch Ness. Perhaps the most significant obstacle is the requirement for a breeding population. One lone monster cannot live for centuries. There must be multiple animals, a minimum viable population, to ensure genetic diversity and survival over time. Scientists estimate this would require at least a few dozen, and more likely hundreds, of individuals to avoid inbreeding and collapse. The idea of a handful of plesiosaurs hiding in the loch is fantastical. The idea of a large, sustainable breeding colony remaining almost entirely undetected for millennia stretches credibility to its breaking point. The food supply is another major hurdle. A single large plesiosaur would be a voracious predator, requiring a significant amount of fish and other prey to survive. A population of them would need an enormous and constant biomass of food to sustain themselves. While Loch Ness has a healthy stock of salmon, trout, and eels, it is unlikely that the ecosystem could support the caloric demands of multiple multi-ton reptiles without causing a noticeable and drastic depletion in fish stocks, something that has never been observed. The plesiosaur, while a beautiful and iconic idea, seems to be a case of our hopes outpacing biological reality. A more modern and increasingly favored theory among biologists points to a creature that is very much at home in these waters, the European eel. These snake-like fish are known to inhabit the loch, and they exhibit a fascinating life cycle that could explain the sporadic nature of sightings. Eels are catadromous, meaning they are born in the ocean, migrate to freshwater to live and grow, and then return to the sea to spawn and die. Every year, millions of tiny glass eels enter Loch Ness from the North Sea via the River Ness. Most grow to a modest size, but occasionally, a rare genetic anomaly or exceptional conditions could allow an eel to achieve gigantic proportions. While most eels top out at around 4 to 5 feet, there are historical accounts and questionable photographs from the past that suggest monster eels possibly reaching lengths of 20 feet or more. Imagine a massive, aged eel, a true leviathan of its kind, dwelling in the deepest, darkest parts of the loch. It would only rarely come to the surface, perhaps when disturbed or during its eventual migration back to the sea. When it did, the sight of several feet of its thick, undulating back breaking the water could easily be mistaken for the humps of a serpentine monster. Its movement would be sinuous and powerful, creating a strong wake. This theory has several advantages. It uses a known resident of the loch, eliminating the problem of how it got there. Eels are perfectly adapted to the freshwater environment. A population of giant eels would be far more sustainable than a population of plesiosaurs, as their food requirements and reproductive strategies are already built into the ecosystem. While a 20-foot eel would be a zoological sensation, it is not outside the realm of biological possibility, making it one of the most plausible explanations for at least a subset of the more credible sightings. Other, less dramatic but equally plausible candidates include large, known species of fish. The Atlantic sturgeon, for instance, is a massive, prehistoric-looking fish that can grow over 15 feet long and weigh nearly 1,000 pounds. It has bony plates along its back, which could account for descriptions of a spiny or humped back. Sturgeon are anadromous, meaning they live in the sea but swim up rivers to spawn. It is entirely possible that an individual sturgeon could occasionally wander into Loch Ness from the Moray Firth, creating a once-in-a-lifetime sighting for a lucky or shocked observer. A large sturgeon rolling at the surface would be a breathtaking and utterly unfamiliar sight to most people, immediately lending itself to a monstrous interpretation. Similarly, a large Greenland shark, a slow-moving cold-water species that can live for centuries, has been proposed. While primarily an ocean dweller, its tolerance for cold, deep water makes a hypothetical journey into the loch just barely conceivable, though highly unlikely. The final possibility is the most exciting for a cryptozoologist, a completely unknown species. Perhaps it is a large, long-necked seal, or a previously unclassified type of giant amphibian or invertebrate. The deep oceans have taught us that we are still discovering large new species, so why not in a deep freshwater lake? The problem again is scale and secrecy. For an unknown species to exist in Loch Ness, it would have to be a vertebrate large enough to account for the sightings, which means it would also have to exist in significant numbers to reproduce. While the loch is vast, it is not an unexplored ocean trench. Its entire perimeter is inhabited and observed. The chances of a breeding population of large, unknown animals evading every net, every underwater camera, and every scientific survey for this long, while simultaneously being glimpsed frequently enough to fuel a legend, creates a paradox that is very difficult to resolve. The biological possibilities present a fascinating spectrum, from the wildly romantic but improbable plesiosaur or to the more mundane but scientifically sound giant eel. Each theory shines a light on a different aspect of the mystery, forcing us to balance what we want to believe with what we know to be true about the natural world. Yet for every sincere misidentification, the loch has also attracted a far more mischievous element, the deliberate hoaxer armed with imagination and a desire to cause a stir. The history of Nessie is unfortunately littered with clever forgeries and outright lies, creating a fog of doubt that has permanently clouded the search for truth. We've already explored the most famous of these, the 1934 surgeon's photograph, a revenge plot that successfully fooled the world for 60 years. But that was far from the only intentional deception. The same year that photo was published, another notorious prank unfolded, masterminded by the same man behind the surgeon's hoax, Marmaduke Wetherell. Stung by the public humiliation over his fake hippo footprints, Wetherell decided to go even bigger. He and his team reportedly constructed an elaborate monster model out of wire, padding, and painted canvas, then photographed it floating in the shallows. These pictures were offered to the press as further proof, but thankfully, editors were becoming wary of Wetherell's evidence and largely ignored this particular stunt, though it demonstrates the relentless drive to manufacture proof where none could be found. The trend of constructed monsters continued decades later. In 1972, a group of university students from the University of Southampton sought to prove how easy it was to create a convincing sighting. Using nothing more than an inflatable raft, some cleverly sculpted latex, and a bit of ingenuity, they built their own Loch Ness Monster. They then filmed their creation as it swam in the loch, the footage showing a convincing humped-back gliding through the water. They released the film to the media, and it was initially taken seriously by some newspapers before the students proudly revealed their prank, aiming to highlight the credulity of the press and the public. Their point was well made. In an environment ripe for suggestion, it doesn't take much to create an illusion that eager eyes will happily believe to be real. The modern digital age has only made the hoaxes toolkit more powerful and accessible. With the advent of photo editing software like Photoshop and later, sophisticated video editing tools and even artificial intelligence, creating a convincing fake has moved from a physical craft to a digital one. The early 2000s saw a flood of doctored images circulating on the nascent internet, each one claiming to be the definitive proof that had eluded researchers for so long. These digital fakes range from the laughably bad, with obvious cut and paste lines and poor lighting, to the incredibly sophisticated, requiring expert analysis to detect the subtle digital fingerprints of manipulation. This new wave of deception presents a unique challenge, where past hoaxes like the surgeon's photo were physical objects that could eventually be confessed to. A digital fake can be created and spread anonymously from anywhere in the world, its origins untraceable and the motivation of its creator often simply to go viral. The cumulative effect of these pranks, from Wetherell's clumsy model to today's digital illusions, has been profoundly damaging to the serious investigation of the Loch's mysteries. Each exposed hoax acts like a boy crying wolf, making the public and the scientific community more cynical and less likely to engage with any new piece of evidence, no matter how compelling it might initially appear. It has created an environment where genuine witnesses with honest, unexplained experiences are often unfairly lumped in with the tricksters and frauds, their credibility questioned before their story is even fully heard. This skepticism is a necessary shield against deception, but it also risks blinding us to authentic anomalies that deserve genuine inquiry. The hoaxes have successfully muddied the waters, not with peat, but with doubt, ensuring that the signal of a potential real mystery is forever drowned out by the noise of deliberate deception. Beyond the sonar pings and disputed photographs, the legend of Nessie achieved something far more profound and tangible. It utterly transformed a remote Scottish glen into a global cultural phenomenon and an economic powerhouse. The monster broke free from the dark waters of the loch to become a versatile star of screen and page, a marketing juggernaut and the engine of an entire regional economy. This cultural impact is perhaps the most undeniable and lasting truth of the entire mystery, a legacy built not on biology but on the irresistible power of a good story. The transformation began almost immediately after the 1933 media explosion. As headlines spread across the globe, a new kind of pilgrim began to arrive in the Scottish Highlands, the tourist. They came by car and by train, armed with cameras and hope, all yearning to catch a glimpse of the unknown. Local businesses, initially perplexed, quickly recognized the opportunity. Small guest houses expanded into hotels, cafes began selling postcards and souvenirs. Boat operators who once ferried fishermen began offering monster hunting tours. The legend provided a desperately needed economic boon, especially in the difficult years following the Depression and later the Second World War. The village of Drumnadrochit, once a quiet hamlet on the loch's western shore, became the unofficial capital of Nessie tourism, now home to 2 competing monster exhibitions and countless gift shops. The creature on the souvenir mugs and T-shirts evolved into a friendly, smiling caricature, a far cry from the fearsome beast of Saint Columba's tale, becoming a cuddly ambassador for Scottish hospitality. Hollywood was quick to seize on this global fascination. The monster's silver screen debut came remarkably early in 1934's The Secret of the Loch, a black and white thriller that captured the initial wave of excitement. But it was in the latter half of the 20th century that Nessie truly became a cinematic staple, often portrayed as a misunderstood gentle giant. A beloved 1970 children's film, The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes, directed by Billy Wilder, featured a magnificent, mechanically operated Loch Ness Monster that was revealed to be a secret submarine, blending the myth with espionage in a wonderfully clever twist. Animated series like The Family Ness brought a family of friendly, cartoon monsters into living rooms, further cementing the creature's place in the hearts of children worldwide. These portrayals, while fictional, were instrumental in shaping the global perception of Nessie, softening its image from a terrifying predator into a curious and endearing relic. The literary world, too, was inundated with titles exploring every conceivable angle of the phenomenon. Books ranged from sober, scientific analyses by respected biologists to passionate arguments by true believers, alongside countless photographic compendiums and children's storybooks. Each new sighting or expedition spawned a fresh wave of publications, ensuring the legend remained constantly in the public conversation. This cross-media saturation created a powerful feedback loop. A film would inspire a new wave of tourists whose visits and own potential sightings would then be documented in books and news reports, which would in turn inspire another film or television special. Nessie became a perennial topic, a mystery that could be reliably revisited every few years to capture a new generation's imagination. Perhaps the most telling sign of Nessie's embedded status in global culture is its use as a universal shorthand for mystery itself. The creature's name and image have been leveraged to sell everything from breakfast cereal and software to tennis balls and insurance policies. It appears in countless cartoons as a go-to punchline, in video games as a hidden Easter egg, and in advertisements as a symbol of something elusive yet desirable. This commercial ubiquity demonstrates that the legend has transcended its origins. It is no longer just a Scottish folktale or a cryptozoological puzzle. It has become a versatile icon, a recognizable piece of cultural vocabulary that instantly communicates the concepts of mystery, discovery, and good-natured fun. The economic impact is staggering. Today, Nessie tourism is estimated to be worth tens of millions of pounds to the Scottish economy annually, supporting thousands of jobs in hospitality, retail, and travel. The A82 road, whose construction first opened the loch to the world, now carries a steady stream of coaches and cars past iconic viewing points like Urquhart Castle. The legend provides a compelling reason for visitors to venture beyond Edinburgh and into the breathtaking landscape of the Highlands, spreading economic benefits across a wider region. This commercial success, however, comes with its own set of tensions. Purists and researchers sometimes lament that the monster industry has trivialized a genuine scientific inquiry, reducing a deep environmental mystery to a cartoon on a keychain. Yet, it is this very commercialization that has ensured the legend's survival and funded continued exploration. The revenue from tourists buying plush toys and boat tickets has, ironically, financed the advanced sonar equipment and scientific surveys that continue to probe the loch's secrets. The myth sustains the search for the truth, creating a unique symbiosis between folklore and science, between fantasy and reality, all playing out on the misty shores of the world's most famous lake. For those who live along its shores, the mystery of Loch Ness is not an abstract debate or a tourist attraction. It is a part of the very fabric of their daily lives, a presence felt in the changing light on the water and the stories passed down through generations. While the world focuses on blurry photographs, the most compelling evidence often comes from the voices of those who have encountered something they simply cannot explain. Their accounts, spanning nearly a century, form a rich tapestry of experience that reveals surprising patterns and a deep, complex relationship between a community and its most famous resident. Consider the story of Alex Campbell, a water bailiff and part-time journalist who was one of the very first to report the modern monster in 1933. As a man who knew the loch intimately, his credibility was rooted in a lifetime of observation. He didn't just see a shape once, he reported multiple sightings over several decades, describing a creature with a long neck and a powerful, humped body that moved with a distinctive undulating motion. His persistent testimony from a man not given to fantasy lent a weight of local knowledge to the early reports that newspaper headlines alone could never provide. A generation later, in 1961, a group of 30 hotel guests from the Caledonian Hotel in Inverness all witnessed a large, dark hump moving against the wind for nearly half an hour. This wasn't a lone, easily dismissed observer. It was a mass sighting, a chorus of credible voices all describing the same inexplicable event, making the argument for a simple misidentification far more difficult to sustain. The patterns that emerge from these countless reports are fascinating. Descriptions of the creature's physical appearance vary, but its behavior often follows a similar script. Many witnesses speak of a sudden, violent upheaval on otherwise calm water, a churning boil that appears without any apparent cause. Others describe a more serene passage, a series of dark humps or a long neck moving in a steady, purposeful line across the loch, often creating a significant wake before slowly and silently submerging. The emotional response is also a common thread: an initial shock and disbelief, followed by a profound sense of awe and privilege. These are not people who are frightened. They are people who feel they have been granted a glimpse of something rare and magnificent. The relationship between the local communities and the legend is a story of two sides. On one hand, there is a deep and genuine affection for Nessie. For many, the creature is a symbol of regional identity, a unique piece of Highland heritage that sets their home apart from anywhere else in the world. It is a source of local pride, a character in the family of the Glen. This embrace is most visibly embodied by the Loch Ness Centre, an exhibition in Drumnadrochit, and the countless B&BS, tour boats and shops that playfully celebrate the myth. The economic impact cannot be overstated. The monster provides a livelihood for hundreds of families, drawing millions of pounds into the local economy every year and ensuring that this remote corner of Scotland remains firmly on the global map. Yet, living inside a global phenomenon also comes with a unique set of challenges. Long-time residents often express a gentle frustration with the sensationalism that can surround the topic. They distinguish between the respectful curiosity of genuine enthusiasts and the disruptive antics of what they sometimes call monster-mad visitors, those who arrive with overblown expectations, demanding instant answers or creating disturbances on the loch. There is a palpable weariness with the endless cycle of hoaxes and exaggerated media claims, which can trivialize a mystery that, to them, feels deeply connected to their home's authentic sense of place. For them, the loch's mystery is a serious, environmental wonder, not just a cartoon or a punchline. This duality means that while locals are happy to share their stories, many do so with a cautious reserve, well aware that speaking out can invite skepticism or even ridicule from the outside world. They have learned to hold their experiences close, sharing them with trusted neighbors and family rather than seeking headlines. This protective instinct has, over time, created a rich oral history of sightings that rarely makes the national news but is whispered about in pubs and community halls, a hidden layer of the legend that is all the more compelling for its quiet authenticity. Their accounts, given by people who understand the loch's many moods and tricks better than anyone, remain the most enduring and human element of this endless mystery. A reminder that at its heart, this is a story about people and their connection to a landscape that still holds the power to astonish. Even with the most advanced sonar and camera technology at our disposal, one of the most powerful forces shaping the Loch Ness mystery operates not in the water, but within the human mind itself. To truly understand why so many people report seeing something extraordinary, we must venture into the fascinating realm of psychology, where our brain's own wiring can transform the ordinary into the unbelievable. At the heart of countless sightings is a fundamental cognitive process known as pareidolia. This is our brain's innate and often subconscious tendency to impose meaningful patterns onto random or ambiguous stimuli. It's the psychological mechanism that allows us to see a face in the clouds, the man in the moon, or the silhouette of a rabbit in the constellations. This trait was essential for our ancestors, helping them instantly recognize a predator hidden in the dappled shadows of the forest. But at Loch Ness, this same survival skill works overtime. A floating log, a wave pattern, or a bird diving for fish does not present a clear image. It offers a vague, shifting shape. A brain primed by legend and hope will eagerly connect these dots, assembling the random shapes into the recognizable form of a head, a neck, and a hump. The loch's dark, peat-stained water acts as the perfect canvas for this mental artistry, providing just enough ambiguity for our pattern-seeking minds to paint in the details of a monster. This process is dramatically amplified by another powerful psychological factor, expectation. When you arrive at Loch Ness, you are stepping into a story. You've seen the documentaries, browsed the books, and perhaps even visited the exhibition center. You are surrounded by people with cameras, all scanning the water with hopeful anticipation. This creates a powerful preconception, a mental filter that directly influences perception. Your brain isn't just passively receiving visual data, it's actively interpreting it based on what it expects to see. This is why two people can look at the exact same patch of water at the same time. One might see a curious seal while the other, swept up in the moment, is utterly convinced they have just witnessed the legendary beast. Expectation acts as a lens, focusing attention on any anomaly while simultaneously filtering out mundane explanations. A sudden splash isn't just a wave, it's a sign. A distant boat wake isn't just water, it's a trail. This doesn't mean witnesses are being dishonest. It means their sincere experience is being shaped by a powerful and deeply human cognitive bias. When these individual experiences are shared within a group, another layer of psychology takes over, the phenomenon of mass suggestion, or what is often called collective delusion. This occurs when the excitement and belief of one person can rapidly spread through a crowd, influencing and reinforcing the perceptions of everyone else. Imagine a group of tourists on a boat tour. One person points and shouts, "There, did you see that?" Immediately, every other person on board turns their attention laser focused on that spot. Someone else says, "I saw something dark." Another confirms, "Yes, it moved." In this charged social environment, the initial ambiguity is quickly solidified into a shared certainty. Individual doubts are suppressed in favor of group consensus. The desire to be part of a special moment, to share in the collective discovery, can override more critical individual analysis. This helps explain mass sightings like the 30 hotel guests in 1961, where the social proof of so many people seeing the same thing feels like irrefutable evidence, even if the original trigger was a natural event like a sudden release of gas or a playful group of otters. The power of these psychological factors isn't limited to the Scottish Highlands. They are the engine behind cryptid sightings all over the world. The same mental processes that create Nessie are at work for those who search for Bigfoot in the Pacific Northwest. A broken branch becomes a sign of a massive hominid passing through. A blurry figure in the distance is instantly interpreted as the legendary Sasquatch, driven by decades of stories and a deep desire to believe. In the case of the Mothman of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, a large, rare bird like a sandhill crane, seen under the stressful conditions of a collapsing bridge project and reported in sensationalist local news, was transformed by collective anxiety and pareidolia into a terrifying winged omen. These patterns repeat because the hardware is the same. The human brain, with its brilliant but sometimes too eager pattern recognition, operating in an atmosphere of potent stories and shared expectation. Understanding this doesn't diminish the mystery of Loch Ness, it deepens it. It reveals that the search is not just about sonar and cameras, but about unraveling the complex and beautiful ways we, as humans, interact with the unknown and seek to find meaning in the shadows of our world. The quest to solve this ancient mystery has now entered its most technologically sophisticated chapter, leveraging tools that would seem like pure science fiction to the investigators of the 1930s. In the 21st century, the search for Nessie has evolved from grainy film and sonar pings to the realms of genetics and digital surveillance, bringing a new level of scientific rigor and surprising results to the enduring enigma. One of the most ambitious and definitive modern efforts was the groundbreaking environmental DNA survey conducted in 2018. Led by Professor Neil Gemmell, a geneticist from the University of Otago in New Zealand, an international team undertook a methodical census of the loch's inhabitants by simply sampling the water. The principle is elegant. Every creature, large or small, sheds countless microscopic fragments of itself into its environment: scales, skin, feces, and mucus. This genetic material, known as eDNA, floats suspended in the water for a day or two before degrading. By collecting hundreds of water samples from all around the loch and at different depths, the team could filter out this genetic debris and sequence it, comparing the results to global databases of known species. It was a process of elimination on a massive scale, offering the potential to identify every significant life form in Loch Ness without ever having to see it. After a year of intensive analysis, the results were announced to a waiting world in September 2019. The comprehensive genetic catalog revealed a detailed picture of the loch's biodiversity, from numerous species of fish like salmon, trout, and eels to various mammals, including a surprising abundance of otter DNA. But what was not found was equally telling. The researchers found no genetic evidence of any large reptilian creature, effectively ruling out the popular plesiosaur theory. They also found no sequences matching those of sturgeon or Greenland sharks, dismissing other prominent biological candidates. The most significant finding, and perhaps the most tantalizing for believers, was the discovery of an enormous amount of eel DNA. Professor Gemmell stated that the team found eel DNA in pretty much every sample taken from the loch, and while they could not confirm the existence of gigantic 8-meter-long eels, they could not definitively rule it out either. The data left the door open for the possibility that giant-sized eels could account for some of the historical sightings, a theory that has now become the leading scientific explanation. Alongside genetic detective work, the surface of the loch is now watched by digital eyes in the sky. Satellite imaging companies like Apple Maps and Digital Globe have captured high-resolution photographs of the water, and in recent years, several of these images have been pored over by armchair detectives who claim to have spotted anomalous shapes. In 2014, an Apple Maps satellite image appeared to show a strange, blurry object just below the surface, reigniting online debate. While these images can be intriguing, experts caution that satellite pictures are prone to digital artifacts, compression errors, and the same old culprits like boat wakes or floating debris. The distance and angle make conclusive analysis nearly impossible, but they represent a new crowdsourced layer to the investigation, where anyone with an internet connection can join the hunt from their living room. Beneath the surface, the search has been revolutionized by underwater drones, or ROVs. These small, agile, and quiet submersibles can operate for hours, transmitting crystal-clear, high-definition video from the darkest crevices of the loch bed. Unlike the noisy motorboats of previous expeditions, which would have scared away any large animal, these drones offer a silent, unobtrusive window into the deep. Private initiatives like the one led by Norwegian technology company Kongsberg Maritime have deployed these drones to create the most detailed sonar map of the loch floor ever produced, searching for caves or crevices that could serve as a monster's lair. While they haven't found any hidden caverns large enough to conceal a breeding population of large animals, they have discovered model monsters, several prop monsters from various movies that were sunk in the loch and never recovered, providing a humorous modern twist on the hoaxing tradition. Perhaps the most significant shift in contemporary research is the move from sporadic, grand expeditions to continuous, automated monitoring. The Loch Ness project, run by veteran researcher Adrian Shine, has installed a network of webcams at strategic points around the loch that broadcast live footage 24 hours a day. This allows for constant observation, eliminating the problem of the monster only appearing when a human happens to be looking. Furthermore, the rise of social media has created a global, decentralized monitoring network. Every tourist with a smartphone is now a potential field researcher, and sightings are instantly reported and dissected on online forums and social platforms. This vast pool of data allows researchers to analyze trends, correlate sightings with weather conditions or boat traffic, and quickly identify and debunk hoaxes, creating a more dynamic and real-time understanding of the phenomena that occur on the loch. What these 21st century tools have ultimately revealed is not a monster, but something almost as fascinating: the incredible complexity of Loch Ness itself. The EDN study painted a picture of a vibrant, healthy ecosystem. Advanced sonar mapping has detailed an underwater landscape more dramatic than previously imagined, with vast, sheer cliffs and deep trenches. The constant video monitoring captures the loch's ever-changing mood, from glassy calm to violently choppy, demonstrating how easily it can conjure illusions. Modern technology hasn't yet found a giant reptile, but it has deepened our appreciation for the loch as a natural wonder, a place where environmental conditions and psychology seamlessly intertwine to create a perfect stage for one of the world's most enduring and captivating mysteries. The search for a definitive answer took a revolutionary leap forward in 2018, moving from sonar pings and blurry photographs to the microscopic realm of genetics. An international team of scientists, led by Professor Neil Gemmell from the University of Otago in New Zealand, embarked on a landmark project to conduct the most comprehensive biological census of Loch Ness ever attempted. Their method was as ingenious as it was simple. Instead of chasing a giant creature, they would let the loch itself reveal its secrets through the tiny fragments of life suspended within it. Every animal that lives in the water constantly sheds invisible traces of itself, tiny pieces of skin, scales, feces, and mucus. This environmental DNA, or eDNA, floats in the water for a short time before degrading, creating a temporary but incredibly detailed genetic inventory of the loch's inhabitants. The team collected over 250 water samples from all across the loch and at various depths from the surface down to the dark, cold abyss. They then filtered these samples to capture any genetic material and used advanced sequencing technology to analyze everything they found. Each strand of DNA was compared against massive global databases containing the genetic blueprints of hundreds of thousands of known species. This process allowed them to identify, with remarkable precision, every significant life form calling Loch Ness home. It was a process of elimination on a monumental scale, offering the potential to finally confirm or deny the existence of a large, unknown animal by proving what was truly there. After a year of meticulous analysis, Professor Gemmell and his team announced their results in September 2019. And the findings sent ripples through the world of cryptozoology and science alike. The genetic map they produced was stunningly detailed, cataloging the loch's rich biodiversity from bacteria to fish. They found ample DNA from expected species like Atlantic salmon, trout, and char, and they even detected genetic traces of land animals like deer, badgers, and an abundance of otters, likely from waste washed into the loch from the surrounding shores. But the real headlines were made by what the survey did not find. There was absolutely no evidence of any large reptilian creature. The team found no DNA sequences that matched those of a plesiosaur or any other prehistoric reptile, effectively closing the door on that popular theory. They also found no genetic traces of large fish like sturgeon or sharks, ruling out other prominent biological candidates. The most significant and surprising discovery was the sheer overwhelming volume of eel DNA. Professor Gemmell reported that eel genetic material was found in, quote, pretty much every single sample from the loch. European eels are known to inhabit the area. They are born in the Sargasso Sea and migrate thousands of miles to European freshwater systems to live and grow before returning to the ocean to spawn. While the study could not confirm the existence of gigantic, 8-meter-long eels, the data left the door open for this possibility. Gemmell stated that the researchers could not rule out that exceptionally large eels might account for some historical sightings. He theorized that what people might be seeing is a massive, aged eel, a true leviathan of its kind, whose thick, undulating body breaking the surface could easily be mistaken for the humps of a mysterious monster. The interpretation of these results created a fascinating split in perspective. For the scientific community, the study was a clear and decisive conclusion. No giant reptile, no strange fish, just a healthy ecosystem with a lot of eels. For many, this was the final, definitive word, closing the book on the monster myth with hard genetic data. However, for dedicated Nessie enthusiasts, the findings were not an ending but a new beginning and a validation of a different sort. The giant eel theory, while less romantic than a plesiosaur, is still a thrilling zoological possibility. The idea that Loch Ness could be home to abnormally large eels of a size never officially recorded is in itself a compelling mystery. The study didn't find a monster, but it did identify a known animal that, under the right conditions of size and perception, could be the source of the legend. So, while the eDNA survey delivered a powerful blow to the most fantastical theories, it also provided a credible, biological framework for the enduring mystery, proving that the truth of Loch Ness may be stranger than fiction, but it is still hiding in the details. While the legend of Nessie holds a unique grip on the global imagination, it is far from alone. This specific brand of mystery, a large, unidentified creature purportedly dwelling in a deep, freshwater lake, is a recurring theme found in bodies of water across the world. By placing the Loch Ness phenomenon alongside its international cousins, we can identify fascinating patterns that reveal less about hidden monsters and more about universal human psychology and the shared characteristics of these enigmatic environments. Just across the Atlantic, in the waters that border New York, Vermont, and Quebec, another famous cryptid glides through the depths. Lake Champlain is home to Champ, a creature whose history of sightings arguably predates those of Nessie. The indigenous Abenaki and Iroquois peoples spoke of a giant serpent in the lake long before European settlers arrived. The first documented account by a European came from Samuel de Champlain himself in 1609, though his description of a 5-foot-long fish with dangerous teeth more closely matches a garfish than a plesiosaur. The modern legend truly took off in the 1800s with a reported sighting by a railroad crew in 1871 and the famous 1883 account by Sheriff Nathan H. Mooney, who described a colossal water serpent about 50 feet long. Like Loch Ness, Lake Champlain is a deep, cold, fjord-like lake formed by glacial activity, providing a similar dark and mysterious habitat that fuels speculation. The search for Champ has followed a parallel path to the hunt for Nessie, complete with sonar expeditions, disputed photographs, and even a proposed law in the Vermont legislature to protect the creature. Traveling further west, we find one of Nessie's most famous counterparts in the vastness of Canada. In the Okanagan Valley of British Columbia, the deep, cold waters of Okanagan Lake are said to be home to Ogopogo. The roots of this legend are deeply tied to First Nations lore. The Syilx people spoke of Enhaayik, a fearsome, shape-shifting water spirit that inhabited the lake and demanded respect and offerings from those who wished to cross its waters. This spiritual guardian was often depicted as a serpentine creature, and its cave was believed to be on a small island near the city of Kelowna. As European settlers moved into the area in the 19th century, the indigenous legend gradually transformed into the more zoological concept of Ogopogo, a physical animal rather than a supernatural spirit. Sightings describe a long, dark, multi-humped creature, with estimates of its length ranging from 40 to 60 feet. The tourism industry around Okanagan Lake has fully embraced its resident mystery, with statues, festivals, and lake tours ensuring the legend continues to thrive, mirroring the economic symbiosis seen in the Scottish Highlands. These legends, though separated by thousands of miles, share a remarkable number of common threads. The environmental stage is almost always the same, a deep, cold, often glacially formed lake with limited visibility. Loch Ness, Lake Champlain, and Okanagan Lake all fit this description perfectly. Their dark waters, stained by tannins or peat, act as a natural cloak, obscuring the familiar and magnifying the ambiguous. This shared physical characteristic creates the perfect canvas for the human mind to project its fears and fantasies. The descriptions of the creatures themselves also follow a familiar pattern. Whether it's Nessie, Champ, or Ogopogo, eyewitness accounts overwhelmingly describe a long-necked, hump-backed serpentine animal, an image that seems to be drawn from a universal archetype of a water monster. This consistency is less likely evidence of a global population of identical creatures and more a testament to the power of cultural exchange and the influence of the plesios or image, which became the default model for a prehistoric aquatic reptile after its fossils were unearthed in the 19th century. Furthermore, the cultural function of these legends reveals another profound similarity. In almost every case, the modern monster story is built upon a much older foundation of indigenous folklore. Long before Nessie was a tourist attraction, the Picts and later Scots told stories of water horses and kelpies that inhabited lochs and rivers, dangerous shape-shifting spirits that served as warnings about the perils of the water. As we saw, the legend of Ogopogo is directly descended from the Sealk stories of Eyewitness. These ancient narratives were not about biology. They were about morality, respect for nature, and explaining the unknown dangers of a powerful and unpredictable environment. The modern, secularized versions of these tales have replaced the spiritual warning with a zoological puzzle, but the core purpose remains: to give a face and a form to the deep, natural mystery of the water. We have exchanged spirits for specimens, but the human need to personify the unknown power of nature endures. The scientific investigations into these global mysteries have also followed a strikingly similar arc, moving from folklore to earnest amateur pursuit and finally to sophisticated technological surveys. Just as Loch Ness has been scanned by sonar and sampled for eDNA, Lake Champlain has been the subject of multiple investigations, including a significant study by a group called Fauna Communications Research Institute that claimed to have recorded unexplained vocalizations resembling the echolocation of a whale or unknown animal. The responses from the scientific establishment are also parallel. While open-minded to the possibility of unknown species, biologists consistently point to the same hurdles of a sustainable breeding population and sufficient food supply that challenge the notion of large predators in these isolated freshwater systems. The journey of each legend is a mirror reflecting the same human story, a blend of sincere curiosity, a desire for wonder, and the endless challenge of applying the scientific method to phenomena that are, by their very nature, elusive and shrouded in the murk of both water and perception. Beyond the mist and mystery, the legend of the Loch Ness Monster has forged an economic reality as tangible as the shores of the loch itself. What began as a local curiosity in the 1930s has blossomed into a multi-million-pound industry, fundamentally reshaping the economy of the Scottish Highlands and demonstrating the immense power of a compelling story. To understand this impact, we need only look at the village of Drumnadrochit. Once a quiet stopping point on the road to Isle of Skye, it has been utterly transformed into the undisputed capital of Nessie tourism. The village is now bookended by two major competing visitor attractions: the official Loch Ness Centre and Exhibition and the older Nessieland Monster Centre. These are not small roadside stands. They are substantial operations that draw hundreds of thousands of visitors annually, each offering their own take on the scientific and mythical history of the creature. Their presence has catalyzed an entire ecosystem of supporting businesses, from bustling cafes and dedicated gift shops to hotels and bed and breakfasts that once might have struggled to fill their rooms. The numbers behind this phenomenon are staggering. It is estimated that the monster legend contributes anywhere from £30 to £60 million to the Scottish economy each year. This revenue supports thousands of jobs directly and indirectly, employing everyone from tour guides and hotel staff to retail workers and boat operators. The iconic Jacobite cruises, which ferry tourists from Inverness down the length of the loch, proudly advertise their route as passing the most famous monster sighting locations, and their boats are consistently filled with hopeful passengers scanning the waves. The A82 road, whose construction first opened the loch to the world, now carries a continuous stream of coaches, cars, and campervans, all drawn to this specific stretch of Scotland because of the elusive creature said to live beneath its surface. This isn't just about selling a few postcards. It's about a narrative so powerful that it dictates travel itineraries for people from every corner of the globe, bringing vital economic activity to a region that otherwise might be bypassed for more accessible urban centres like Edinburgh or Glasgow. The merchandise alone is a testament to the legend's commercial versatility. Walk into any shop in the Highlands and you'll find Nessie in 100 different forms. She smiles from t-shirts, bobs as a plush toy, adorns keychains, and even graces bottles of local whiskey. This commodification has softened the monster's image dramatically, transforming it from the fearsome water beast of Saint Columba's time into a cuddly, cartoonish ambassador for Scottish hospitality. This friendly branding is a deliberate and successful strategy, making the mystery accessible and fun for families and ensuring that every visitor, regardless of whether they believe, can take a piece of the magic home with them. The economic benefits ripple outward, supporting local artisans, printers, and manufacturers who produce these goods, creating a supply chain that is entirely dependent on the persistence of a myth. However, building a regional economy on the foundation of an unproven phenomenon creates a unique set of challenges and tensions. For the local communities living alongside the legend, there is a constant balancing act between embracing the economic boon and preserving the dignity and authenticity of their home. Many long-term residents express a complex dual perspective. They are deeply grateful for the jobs and prosperity the monster brings, recognizing that it has saved many small businesses and kept young people from moving away for work. Yet, there is also a palpable weariness with the more frivolous side of the phenomenon. They can grow tired of the endless cycle of sensationalist media stories, the occasional disruptive monster hunter who trespasses on private land, and the simplification of their beautiful, complex region into a single, kitschy punchline. There's a concern that the deeper history and culture of the Highlands, the clans, the battles, the Gaelic language, the stunning natural beauty, can be overshadowed by the search for a monster. This commercial success also creates a curious, self-perpetuating cycle. The revenue generated from tourism doesn't just support local families, it also funds the very technology used to search for the creature. The money visitors spend on boat tours, museum tickets, and souvenirs helps finance the next sonar survey or underwater drone expedition. This creates a fascinating symbiosis. The myth finances the search for the truth, and any new piece of potential evidence, no matter how inconclusive, generates a new wave of global headlines that in turn drives the next surge of tourists. It's a feedback loop where commerce and curiosity are inextricably linked, each one fueling the other in an endless dance. The legend is no longer just a folktale. It is a sophisticated economic engine, a brand that requires careful management to ensure it continues to benefit the community without consuming its identity. In the end, the most concrete thing to ever emerge from the murky waters of Loch Ness may not be a prehistoric reptile, but a thriving, resilient, and utterly unique economy built entirely on the human capacity for wonder. While the legend of Nessie inspires wonder and dedication in its believers, it has also drawn the sharp, analytical gaze of some of the world's most respected scientific minds, who offer a compelling counter-narrative rooted in evidence and reason. These prominent skeptics do not seek to spoil the fun, but rather to champion a different kind of wonder, the wonder of understanding the natural world's true and often more fascinating realities. Sir David Attenborough, whose voice is synonymous with the awe of the natural world, has long considered the Loch Ness mystery. He finds the idea of a surviving population of plesiosaurs, as he has stated, biologically incredible. His skepticism isn't dismissive, it's informed by a deep understanding of zoology and ecology. He points to the insurmountable problem of a breeding colony. For such a large creature to have persisted for centuries, there would need to be not one, but dozens, and more likely hundreds, of individuals to maintain genetic diversity. The idea that a group of massive, air-breathing reptiles could live, hunt, breed, and die in the loch for millennia without leaving behind any bones, any bodies, or any conclusive evidence beyond fleeting glimpses is, from a biological standpoint, a virtual impossibility. Attenborough redirects our awe toward the creatures we know exist, suggesting that the true magic lies in protecting the biodiversity we have, rather than chasing the ghosts of what we've lost. This scientific perspective was put to the ultimate test by the renowned magician and professional skeptic James Randi, who dedicated his life to investigating paranormal claims with a showman's flair and a scientist's rigor. Randi approached the Loch Ness mystery not as a zoological puzzle, but as a masterclass in human perception and deception. He famously demonstrated how easy it is to create a convincing monster sighting using simple, everyday objects. In one memorable television segment, he constructed a convincing serpentine hump using only a stuffed toy animal and a homemade remote-controlled device, filming it from a distance in a lake to replicate the classic Nessie photograph. His point was devastatingly simple. If a retired magician with a few dollars worth of materials can fake a monster in an afternoon, how much weight should we give to a grainy, decades-old photograph? Randi's work highlighted the critical importance of extraordinary evidence for extraordinary claims. He argued that before we invoke prehistoric survivors, we must first rule out all possible mundane explanations, from floating logs and boat wakes to deliberate hoaxes. For him, the real mystery wasn't in the water. It was in the human mind's incredible capacity for self-deception and its willingness to believe what it desperately wants to be true. The evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins brings a similarly sharp focus to the psychology behind the myth. He argues that the Loch Ness Monster is a powerful example of a memeplex, a cultural idea that behaves like a virus, spreading and replicating itself because it taps into something deep within the human psyche. The idea of a monster in the loch is a compelling story. It's exciting, it's mysterious, and it sells newspapers and tourist trips. This meme found a perfect environment in which to thrive, a vast, dark, and deep body of water that naturally lends itself to secrecy. Dawkins would argue that we are pattern-seeking animals, a trait honed by evolution for survival. This same trait, however, makes us prone to pareidolia, seeing significant shapes in random patterns. When you combine this hardwired tendency with a powerful cultural meme and the suggestive, misty atmosphere of Loch Ness, you create a perfect storm for misidentification. A floating log becomes a humped back, a line of otters becomes a serpentine body, a diving bird becomes a periscope-like neck. Dawkins encourages us to appreciate the true wonder, the evolved human brain that is so good at finding patterns that it often finds them even when they aren't there. The collective arguments of these skeptics form a powerful and cohesive counter-argument to the monster myth. They don't deny that people see something. Instead, they provide a comprehensive toolkit for understanding what that something most likely is. They shift the focus from sonar pings in the deep to the mechanics of perception, the history of hoaxes, and the unyielding rules of biology. Their perspective invites us to experience Loch Ness not as the home of a failed scientific discovery, but as a living laboratory for understanding how we, as humans, interact with the unknown. It's a celebration of critical thinking, a reminder that the desire for magic should be balanced by the rigorous and often more rewarding pursuit of truth. The Loch's greatest trick, they might say, isn't hiding a monster, it's convincing us to look for one in the first place. But the creature itself wasn't the only force shaping its own legend. From the very beginning, the media served as a powerful engine, amplifying whispers into headlines and transforming a local oddity into a worldwide obsession. The relationship between the press and the monster is a fascinating story in itself, one that evolved from outright sensationalism to more measured investigation, yet always played a pivotal role in defining what the public believed it was seeing. It all started with that fateful decision in 1933 by Inverness Courier editor Evan Barron to label the Mackay sighting as a monster. That single, deliberate word choice was a spark in a tinderbox. Barron understood the power of a good story, and he knew that monster would capture far more attention than large fish or unidentified animal. He was proven right almost instantly. The story was quickly picked up by Scottish papers, then by London's mighty Fleet Street, and then it leaped across the Atlantic, making front-page news in the United States. This initial media frenzy set a pattern that would repeat for decades. Newspapers, particularly the British tabloids, found that Nessie was a reliable circulation booster. During the slow news weeks of the 1930s, a fresh sighting or a dubious photograph was a gift to editors. The headlines grew larger and more extravagant, often reporting claims with little to no verification. This created a powerful feedback loop. Sensational headlines attracted more readers, which encouraged more people to visit the loch, which in turn generated more potential sightings to be reported. The media wasn't just observing the phenomenon, it was actively fueling it, creating an environment where the expectation of seeing something incredible made misidentification almost inevitable. The pressure to produce new content also made the press vulnerable to hoaxes, as the rush to be the first to break the definitive story often overrode healthy journalistic skepticism, a lesson painfully learned with the eventual exposure of the surgeon's photograph. The arrival of television introduced a new dimension to the myth-making process. Where newspapers could only describe, television could show. Programs like the BBC's Panorama and countless documentary specials brought the dark, mysterious waters of Loch Ness directly into people's living rooms. This visual medium was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it allowed for more thorough and balanced investigative journalism, giving scientists like Adrian Shine a platform to explain their methods and present sonar data to a mass audience. On the other hand, the need for compelling visuals and dramatic storytelling often led to a sensationalistic approach. Documentaries would often present blurry footage or questionable eyewitness accounts without sufficient critical context, using ominous music and a narrator's grave tone to suggest proof where none existed. The medium's power to create mood and atmosphere often outweighed its commitment to factual rigor, leaving viewers thrilled and convinced by presentation rather than evidence. The digital age has completely transformed this media landscape, democratizing the narrative but also flooding it with noise. Where once a few major newspapers and television networks controlled the story, now anyone with a smartphone and an internet connection can become a broadcaster. Social media platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube allow for the instantaneous sharing of potential sightings, creating viral sensations in a matter of hours. This has its benefits. It creates a vast, decentralized network of observers and allows for the rapid crowd-sourced debunking of obvious hoaxes. However, it also accelerates the spread of misinformation. A digitally altered image or a cleverly edited video can circle the globe long before any fact-checker can analyze it, seeding belief in thousands of viewers before the truth can catch up. The algorithms that power these platforms prioritize engagement over accuracy, meaning the most sensational and unbelievable claims often receive the widest distribution. Throughout all these eras, the tone of media coverage has swung like a pendulum between credulous enthusiasm and cynical debunking, with each extreme shaping public perception in a different way. The early, breathless reports of the 1930s created a sense of exciting possibility, making the monster feel real to a public eager for wonder. The more skeptical investigations of the 1970s and 80s, prompted by exposures of hoaxes, introduced a necessary dose of realism but sometimes veered into dismissiveness, alienating sincere witnesses. Today, we see a more nuanced blend. Responsible media outlets now often pair reports of new sightings with input from biologists and skeptics, providing context and alternative explanations. The story is no longer treated as a simple binary of real or fake, but as a complex tapestry weaving together folklore, psychology, environmental science, and modern technology. The media's role has evolved from myth maker to myth interpreter, reflecting a broader cultural shift in how we engage with mysteries, valuing the journey of investigation as much as the destination of a final answer. To truly understand the legend taking shape in the modern era, we must venture beyond the water's edge and into the misty glens and ancient ruins that surround Loch Ness, for a monster story does not emerge from a vacuum. It is woven from the very landscape and the deep, often turbulent history of the people who live there. The Scottish Highlands are a place where the past feels intensely present, where every crumbling stone and silent loch seems to hold a memory. This region has been a crossroads of culture and conflict for millennia, and its folklore is a rich tapestry of beliefs that provided the perfect cultural soil for the Nessie legend to take root and flourish. Long before Scotland was a unified nation, this land was the domain of the Picts, a mysterious and powerful people who left behind no written records but whose spirit endures in the stunning and enigmatic symbol stones scattered throughout the region. These intricately carved standing stones, found near the shores of Loch Ness and throughout the Great Glen, are a window into their worldview, and fascinatingly, many of these stones feature depictions of strange and fantastic animals. There are carvings of beasts with long, curling snouts, creatures that look part dolphin and part elephant, and serpentine forms that writhe across the stone. Archaeologists refer to these as Pictish beasts, and their exact meaning is lost to time. They could represent mythical water spirits, tribal symbols, or stylized versions of real animals. But their presence establishes a crucial pattern. For the people living by these waters over 1,000 years ago, the idea of powerful, unknown creatures was already a fundamental part of their artistic and spiritual expression. The monster, in a sense, was already being carved into the identity of the place. As the centuries turned, the landscape became dominated by a new kind of stone symbol, the fortress. The most iconic of these, Urquhart Castle, stands in magnificent ruin on a headland overlooking Loch Ness. Its strategic location, controlling a key point on the Great Glen, made it a prize fought over for hundreds of years between Scots, English, and rival Highland clans. From the 13th to the 17th centuries, Urquhart was a stage for some of the most violent and dramatic chapters in Scottish history, besieged, captured, and recaptured in a relentless cycle of warfare. For the people living in its shadow, the loch was not a place of leisure. It was a backdrop to conflict, a dark moat guarding a dangerous castle. This context of constant threat and uncertainty seeped into the local consciousness. A strange shape on the water could easily be interpreted as an omen of an impending raid or a spectral warning. The castle itself, with its own legends of ghosts and tragedy, added a layer of Gothic atmosphere to the loch, reinforcing the idea that this was a place where the normal rules of the world did not quite apply. This atmosphere was deeply enriched by the broader well of Scottish folklore, which is overflowing with water spirits far more fearsome than the friendly Nessie of souvenir shops. Long before the 1933 sighting, parents warned their children about the kelpie, a shape-shifting water spirit that most often appeared as a beautiful horse grazing by the riverbank. If a child was foolish enough to climb on its back, the kelpie's skin would become adhesive, and it would gallop headlong into the water, drowning its victim. Then there was the Uist, an even more vicious water horse said to inhabit lochs, which could transform into a handsome man to lure people to their doom. These stories were not mere entertainment, they were functional folklore, serving as potent warnings about the very real dangers of the deep, cold, and unpredictable waters of the Scottish lochs. They taught respect for the water's power. When the first modern reports of a large creature in Loch Ness emerged, they didn't arrive in a cultural void. They landed in a community that had been prepared for centuries through story and song to believe that something otherworldly and dangerous could indeed live in the depths. Weaving all these threads together, the ancient Pictish carvings, the bloody history of the castles, and the dark folk tales, we see a cultural ecosystem perfectly primed for a monster. The legend provided a new, modern container for very old fears and wonders. It offered a zoological explanation for the unease people had always felt by the deep, dark water. The kelpie and the each were supernatural, but Nessie was a physical animal, a creature that could potentially be found and understood, which made the mystery even more compelling in the scientific age. The monster became a new kind of folklore for a new era, one that could be explored with boats and cameras rather than just through stories told by the fire. It was the ancient spirit of the loch, reimagined for the 20th century, a timeless echo of the Highlands' mysterious soul given a form the whole world could finally see and seek. The quest to unravel the mystery of Loch Ness is far from over. In fact, it's entering one of its most exciting phases yet, propelled by a new generation of technology that promises to see deeper, listen closer, and analyze more precisely than ever before. While the EDNA survey delivered a landmark snapshot, science is a process of constant refinement, and the next chapter will be defined by persistent, automated observation and the power of global collaboration. The future of Nessie research is shifting from grand, episodic expeditions to a state of continuous, silent vigilance, transforming the entire loch into a living laboratory monitored around the clock. Leading this charge is the concept of environmental DNA sampling as an ongoing practice, not a one-off event. Future studies plan to deploy autonomous samplers at key locations and depths, collecting water continuously over months or even years. This would allow scientists to track the loch's biodiversity through the seasons, monitoring the migration patterns of eels, the presence of any large, unusual fish, and perhaps detecting a transient species that only occasionally visits from the sea. By establishing a detailed baseline of what's normal, any truly anomalous genetic signature would stand out like a beacon. This approach moves beyond simply asking what's in there to a more dynamic question: how does the life in the loch change over time, and are there patterns we've missed? Beneath the surface, the next generation of underwater drones is set to revolutionize exploration. These aren't the loud, propeller-driven ROVs of the past, but sleek, silent, biomimetic machines that glide through the water like large fish, causing minimal disturbance. Equipped with high-definition stereo cameras, advanced sonar, and powerful lights, they can be programmed to patrol predefined transects of the loch bed, mapping every inch in stunning detail. Their artificial intelligence can be trained to recognize the shape of known objects like the hulks of sunken boats or the distinctive form of a large eel, and flag anything that doesn't match for human review. Some designs even incorporate suction samplers to collect biological material from interesting targets for instant EDNA analysis on board, creating a closed loop of detection and identification. Perhaps the most transformative development is the plan to create a permanent, distributed sensor network across the loch. Imagine a series of buoys moored at strategic points from Urquhart Bay to the mouth of the River Owich, each acting as a sentinel. These platforms will be equipped with hydrophones to listen for unusual sounds, sonar to scan the water column vertically, and sensors to monitor water temperature, chemistry, and particulate matter. All this data would be streamed in real time to a central command center and, excitingly, made available to the public online. This network would finally provide the context that has been missing from individual sightings, allowing researchers to correlate a potential sonar contact with, for instance, a simultaneous methane release from the sediment or a specific weather event that could cause a visual mirage. This move toward open data taps into the immense potential of citizen science. The Loch Ness Project and other research groups are developing mobile apps that allow every tourist and resident to become a data point. Visitors could log their sightings in a standardized way, including GPS coordinates, weather conditions, and upload their photos and videos directly into a verified database. An algorithm could then instantly cross-reference these reports with data from the sensor network. Was there a sonar anomaly at that location at that exact time? Was a temperature inversion occurring that could distort light? This collective effort would create an unprecedented public archive, filtering out the noise of hoaxes and misidentifications while highlighting the most credible and scientifically valuable reports for professional follow-up. These technological leaps are complemented by a growing sophistication in our understanding of the loch's own deceptive nature. Future research will increasingly use computer modeling to simulate the loch's complex physics. Scientists can input real-time data on wind, temperature, and water density to accurately predict when and where optical illusions like superior mirages are most likely to occur. They can model the release of methane bubbles from the peat-rich bottom, visualizing exactly how such an event would appear on sonar and on the surface. By creating a digital twin of Loch Ness, researchers can effectively run experiments in a virtual world, testing hypotheses and ruling out natural phenomena with a degree of confidence that was previously impossible. So, what might all this effort ultimately reveal? The most likely outcome is not the discovery of a single monstrous entity, but a profound demystification of the loch itself, which is a wondrous result in its own right. We may finally document a population of exceptionally large geriatric eels, explaining a significant portion of the historical sightings and representing a fascinating zoological discovery. The sensor network will almost certainly capture breathtaking natural phenomena previously unseen: methane eruptions, complex psych waves, and stunning light refractions that will provide the definitive natural explanations for countless past reports. We will gain a comprehensive, real-time understanding of the loch's delicate ecosystem, providing invaluable data for conservation efforts in a changing climate. The greatest legacy of future Nessie research may not be a monster in a tank, but the transformation of a legend into one of the world's most extensively monitored and thoroughly understood freshwater bodies, a testament to how a timeless mystery can inspire a timeless pursuit of knowledge. And so we find ourselves at the end of our journey, standing on the pebbled shore of Loch Ness, the mist clinging to the hills and the deep, dark water holding its silence. We have sifted through the evidence from the ancient account of Saint Columba to the cutting-edge EDN, our analysis of Professor Jamil. We have celebrated the grand hoaxes and marveled at the sincere, baffling sonar contact. We have weighed the plesios or against the giant eel and explored the powerful tricks of light and psychology. The scientific case for a literal, physical monster living in the loch has never been weaker, and yet the legend has never felt more alive. This paradox is the very heart of the mystery. We are not captivated by Nessie in spite of the lack of proof, but perhaps because of it. The enduring power of this story lies in its beautiful defiance. In our modern age, where satellites map every inch of the globe and science offers explanations for so much of our world, Loch Ness remains a stubborn pocket of the unexplained. It represents the thrilling idea that not everything can be catalogued, that wonder can still exist just beyond the reach of our smartphones and our certainty. The monster is a symbol of that last great unknown, a reminder that mystery is a necessary ingredient of the human experience. It invites us to ask, what if? In a world that often insists on telling us what is, this isn't about rejecting science, it is about complementing it. Science explains the mechanics of the universe, but stories like Nessie speak to the soul. They fuel our imagination, our sense of adventure, and our connection to a past where the world felt vaster and more filled with magic. Ultimately, the search was never really about finding an animal. It was about the act of searching itself. It was about the community formed on those boat tours, the families spending a day together by the water, the shared hope flickering in every pair of eyes scanning the surface. The legend gave us a reason to look more closely at the natural world, to appreciate the breathtaking beauty of the Scottish Highlands, and to connect with a history rich with folklore and tradition. Nessie is a catalyst for curiosity, a gateway to exploring geology, biology, and the fascinating quirks of human perception. The real monster is not a prehistoric reptile, it is the enduring, indefatigable human spirit of wonder. It is our refusal to let the world become entirely mundane, our desire to believe that there are still secrets waiting in the shadows, ready to ignite our imagination and remind us that the greatest adventures often begin not with an answer but with a question. And as long as that loch lies dark and deep under the Scottish sky, the question will remain, and the world will be a far more interesting place for it.